Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I am Matt Connarton, and of course, as always, to my right is the Honorable Gary S. Hopper. How are you, Gary?
Good.
Good. I see your arm sealed.
Huh? Yes.
Your arm.
Yes,
I thought something looked a little different about you today. So that's good. So how are you?
Good.
Good. Good.
So our guests today are Representative
Maureen.
Maureen Mann and Bonnie Right. Right? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Jeez, you would think you'd never done this before. Come on, Gary. Jeez. What's wrong with you? Sorry, go ahead.
What?
Well, it's your show.
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do.
What do you mean? You do this every week. Oh, my God. What is wrong with you? I'll tell you. Amateurs.
Okay, one question for you, Matt.
Yes, Gary.
Why should you never trust atoms?
I don't know.
Because they make up everything.
Oh.
Hey, what's going on over here? Get out of there, you little jerk.
Oh.
Kids these days.
Oh, that's right. You're Gary.
Yeah, I'm Gary.
Who was that?
That was Scott Sanborn, my grandson. He tripped me and knocked me down so I couldn't get here on time.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
I couldn't tell you guys apart.
I know, because he's my grandson. We pretty much look identical.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So anyway, Matt,
Yes.
we're here to talk about GMOs and GMO labeling. So first, I would like to start off with an explanation of exactly what GMOs are for the people that aren't familiar with this. So yeah, either one of you ladies want to tackle that, or?
Okay, I would like to. One of the things that many people confuse, and one of the reasons people give against labeling, is they say, oh, well, for thousands of years, people have been genetically engineering foods. And that's just not the case. When we talk about hybrids or, taking a gene from one tomato to another tomato, that's not genetic engineering. Grafting a part of an apple tree onto a pear tree is not genetic engineering. Genetic engineering is when you actually insert the genes of a totally alien or foreign species, such as glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, or BT, which is an insecticide, and insert that into genetically alter the corn or the soy or the foodstuff by inserting those things. For instance, glyphosate makes a crop Roundup ready. I can spray Roundup on the crop. It will kill the weeds, but the Roundup ready corn will be unaffected. So by genetically engineering it, we are changing the genetic makeup by inserting pesticides, herbicides, and that's what we're then ingesting in our food.
Isn't Roundup, now I forget what type of orchard it is in Mexico, but there's a bunch of the workers at that orchard who have recently got very, very sick very quickly, and I believe it was Roundup as the primary suspect as to the cause of their ailments. I thought Roundup was like hugely carcinogenic or something. I forget what was wrong with it, but it's not helpful to humans.
Roundup is one of the most commonly used herbicides. You can buy it just about any of the big box stores.
Okay.
And they're using it on, it's the most common used herbicide, I believe, in the world, definitely in the United States.
Okay.
They use it to kill weeds in between cracks and grasses. They use it on crops to dry them out, such as wheat. A lot of people think that wheat is genetically engineered. It's not. But they spray the glyphosate or the Roundup on the wheat to dry it out just before they harvest it.
Okay.
So it still has that residue of that chemical on it.
Okay, so the wheat itself isn't genetically modified.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's a common misconception, but
Yeah.
By the common definition of genetically engineered, wheat is not does not meet that criteria.
Okay, so we might have different strains of wheat, but it's not genetically modified.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, it depends on your terminology, because genetically modified could mean the process of hybridization or cross-pollination. But what we're talking about is genetic engineering, when the scientists take the DNA from one species, combine it with the DNA from another species that could never possibly merge. They can't have babies by nature. It is only what can happen in a lab.
Okay.
So that's the big thing, is that what nature can do, we're happy with. But what the scientists in the labs and the little white coats and stuff are changing, forcibly taking the DNA from one thing, forcing it into something else.
Don't use the term the men in their little white coats, because I get flashbacks.
yeah. And when you get nervous, we get nervous.
Right,
and,
exactly.
Relax.
Deep
breath.
Deep breath. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
good.
I do want to say, though, that
we
the
have
bills that have been introduced are not interested in banning genetically engineered food.
Can you hold that?
Yeah.
Okay, we got a phone call. We only get one every 6 months.
Hi, welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Who's on the line?
Yeah, this is Steve.
Hi, Steve. What's up?
Yeah, so I'd ask them, I eat a lot of corn in the summer, tomatoes, cubes. And there's a farm called Wilson's Farm that I go down and get my corn. Is that genetically modified corn that you know of? And if there is, do you know of any farms around in this area that have genetically modified corn or, fresh produce?
I can.
Go ahead.
Most sweet corn, which is what we buy at our local farm stand to eat as human food, is not genetically engineered. Although most, so to speak, feed corn for animals, corn used for ethanol, that is genetically engineered. There is beginning to be genetically engineered sweet corn.
Okay.
So the best thing to do is ask the people at Wilson Farm. Ask the people
Right.
where.
Do you know of any farms around here yourself, like in New Hampshire itself, that have genetically modified corn?
I know there are farms that grow it. For instance, the Pearl Farm in Loudon, and I know this because he testified at the hearing. They grow genetically engineered food, but they.
Did they tell you that, or?
Yes, he said they grow it, and the problem is, of course, if I'm growing genetically engineered corn for pig feed in this field, and I'm growing non-genetically engineered sweet corn for people in this field, there's no real way to keep them apart. And that's why he, for instance, was opposed to labeling. But I can...
do they, by law, do they, like if you go up and, like you just said, ask the person who's there, the manager or whatever, by law, do they have to tell you that it's genetically modified?
There is no law at this time to force them to tell you. You just have to get to know your farmer and trust them.
But that's why we have introduced legislation in both the New Hampshire House and the New Hampshire Senate to require food sold at retail to be labeled whether or not it contains genetically enginered food. But right now, there is no.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. No, go ahead.
He's still listening.
We have New Hampshire Right to Know GMO, which is the organization that I represent. We have a website, and on that website we have a page called sponsors or supporters. I'm sorry. On that list, we have a bunch of farmers who have been willing to say, we support labeling.
Okay.
So if the caller went to one of those farms, he could be pretty sure that they would probably not have genetically engineered, or if they do, they would be very willing to say that they do. But to the best of my knowledge, they do not.
Okay.
So part of the problem is there is no real requirement that anybody tell you anything. And somebody that does say they have GMO free food isn't necessarily, or because except for I guess that'd be false advertising. But other than that,
And Actually, it's misrepresentation, and that's handled by DHHS
Yeah.
in New Hampshire. And they already have a program in place for people who are accused of being mislabeled,
Okay.
mislabeling. However, I think it's a very fair program because, for instance, if you were a small baker and
Right.
you were misrepresenting anything in the food that you were selling, the first thing that happens is DHHS goes to you and sits down and says, are you aware of the law? Do you understand what the labeling requirements are? Because most of the time, it's people just don't know the law.
Right.
And the idea is to sit down, clarify it. Only if someone is a repeat offender, then a system of fines comes in.
Right.
But that's not just GE Foods, that's any mislabeling.
Right.
DHHS is what?
A Department of Health and Human Services.
Okay. All right.
Now, so your organization is basically trying to get it so people know what's in their food.
My organization has two processes.
Right.
We are educating first. We want people to understand what GMOs are so that they know that they don't want them. So we're trying to spread the word across the state by educational programs to let people know what it is. They got to know what it is to be able to call you guys and say, we want this labeled,
Right.
if they don't know what it is. So we're twofold, education and legislation.
I'd just like to add,
Yeah.
I'm certainly a supporter of GMO right to know, but I am was the prime sponsor of the bill
Yeah.
as it was introduced, and I think it is important to say that from the legislative point of view, we are not interested in telling people all genetically engineered foods are bad. What we're interested is transparency. I see it as a right to know issue. Just like I have the right to know when I buy a car, there's all this information provided about miles per gallon and what it's made out of and what it does and what the warranty is. When I buy a prescription drug, I get that little white folded up piece of paper that goes on and on with chemical diagrams,
Right.
It tells you all the things it's going to do to you.
all
Or
the
might.
side effects.
Yeah, yeah.
The thing with genetically engineered food labeling is we're not asking to ban it. We're not saying it's bad. I suspect some is fine, some is bad, some will depend on the individual. What we are saying is we need transparency in food labeling,
Right.
and that's what the legislation is about.
Yeah.
So I just want to make that clear.
Well-
It's
well-
not that we're saying it's bad, we're saying we have the right to know.
I'll tell you, like I said on Facebook, this is one of the few issues that I broke ranks with the House Republican Alliance. House Republican Alliance is the conservative right-wing nutbags and the well, I'm a member.
You
so
said
I-
Right, right. So
I
you can
didn't.
say that. Yes.
Okay. And basically, what their criteria is it moral? Is it constitutional? Is it further burden on the taxpayers or whatever? And they were against GMO labeling. But see, I come at it from a different angle. I'm allergic to nuts. All growing up, people didn't have to label stuff. And every time you ate something out in a restaurant, it's like playing Russian roulette. I went to a restaurant here in Manchester quite a few years ago, and usually I could take a small bite of something and tell that I'm allergic to it pretty quickly. And but unfortunately, this one time at this restaurant in Manchester, they had it was a buffet, and they had a bunch of ice cream. It wasn't labeled, and they had what I thought was cookie dough and chocolate swirl. And I started eating it, and the cookie dough, I says, I think I might be allergic to this, but it was hard to tell because it was cold, so it kind of calmed my receptors down. And the lady says, no, that's just cookie dough. I says, okay. So I finished it off, and then I says, oh, wow, I guess I was wrong. Somebody's wrong. That wasn't cookie dough. She goes, yeah, it was. So what's the other stuff? She says, oh, that's peanut butter swirl. So I ended up at CMC, and it was actually probably one of the funniest things that ever happened to me, because I was at CMC, and I'm squeamish. I am a total sissy. And I get all these IVs on my arm, because when you get an allergic reaction that bad, you go right to the head of the class. You don't have to sit in the waiting room. They just, wheel you right in and start pumping you full of fluids, because if they don't, you can die. And so I'm sitting there with all these things in my arm, and I had my asthma spray in my left pocket. And I asked the doctor, I says, can I use my asthma spray? And she says, yeah, go ahead. There's a nurse standing, it's a Friday night, there's a nurse standing right there. And I didn't want to reach in my pocket because I was afraid I'd knock that stuff out, you know? So I says, would you mind grabbing my asthma spray for me? And she says, I'm not falling for that. But anyway, I lost her. What did I talk about? With GMOs, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so at any rate, for somebody who's got allergies, it's hugely important that things
Yeah.
are labeled. And I think with GMOs, I think it's hugely important that they label things, because they could start splicing in legumes with something else to make them for whatever reason. And the next thing you know, I'm eating something that I think is a tomato, or what, I don't know what they would splice it with, or
Well,
something that
a
has
pig
always,
gene, actually.
huh?
A pig gene, actually.
Or fish.
Or fish. I'm allergic to fish.
Flounder and tomatoes have been. It's
And
not
int-
on the market.
Okay.
It's not
But
commercial.
So,
and
well, that's-
interestingly enough, and I don't mean to interrupt, but you can tell I'm a fanatic about this.
Go ahead.
A woman named Belinda Martineau, who is a scientist who developed the first genetically engineered tomato called the Flavor Saver. She has come out strongly in favor of labeling, and one of the reasons is because of what you just said. If something is genetically engineered with, say, a fish gene, and you're allergic to certain kinds of fish, do you have not just the right but the need to know that?
Right. Yeah, that's my point. That's one of the reasons I came out and went against, lost some points on my HRA score.
You rhino.
I know, right? It's because of that. Because I know that they could mix it with a legume.
Yeah.
I didn't even know they were mixing vegetables with other creatures entirely. I think that's insane. But
Well, what is the argument against it? I mean, I don't know what.
free market. In other words, a lot of the Republicans been taken over by libertarians, and libertarians believe in absolute free market. The free market, if it was left alone, everybody would love each other.
Right, right.
And there would be daisies blooming on the streets,
Yeah.
and
kind of a
it would be
Wild West
it'd
approach
be-
to capitalism.
It'd be basically if you had complete free market, it would be nirvana.
Right, right.
I think they are totally full of baloney.
Well, and the
Yeah.
other thing is, wouldn't a totally free market not withhold information from consumers?
Yeah.
If
well, no,
I'm,
that case you're wrong.
Oh, okay.
I believe, because if you're saying it's a totally free market, that everything is buyer beware.
True.
So therefore, there's no restrictions at all. In other words, if they put arsenic in it to make it, bring out that nice metallic flavor that you really like, that's okay too. Because that's how
That is
Adam-
kind of the libertarian
That's a
attitude.
that's a
buyer
libertarian
beware.
mindset.
I guess
Yeah.
my position would be, if you expect me as a consumer to take responsibility for my own actions and my own purchases, then
Give me the information.
give me the information.
Oh, I
do
agree.
it, and then it's
Yeah.
my responsibility.
I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think I don't trust the free market system as being a panacea for nirvana. I don't think we get there. I think people are fundamentally humans and will do whatever they can to save a dollar, and if they can genetically alter it with a catfish or something like that, and then I'm
Or
it might
eels.
kill 50 people nationwide, but so what? They made an extra $100,000. I don't think I explained that well at all.
Actually, I think you
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
I think you did. Yeah. No, yeah.
But anyway, go on. So that I just wanted to let you know why I was in favor of that, because as somebody with severe allergies, I'm really worried about this, because there's a lot of things I'm allergic to. I didn't know they were.
Well, if you look at the statistics for allergies, it appears that the number of people with allergies. I mean, how many kids, when we were kids, how many kids in your classroom had allergies?
I don't know. I was so allergic to everything even then.
Really?
But you
Yeah,
were
what-
in the
what-
minority. But if you look at now,
I've always been in the minority.
my granddaughter in first grade has a whole table of kids that eat lunch together. It's the peanut-free table. They can't have peanuts in
Right.
it.
Well, so is there a cycle here where the GMOs are perhaps causing more allergies, or?
we can't prove it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of concerns about what might be happening to our health if you look at what has happened to the human health in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
We've been eating GMOs for 20 years.
Right,
It
right.
got introduced to our diet and just kind of slipped in.
How did it
And-
get? What was it first introduced
In
in?
1992, there was originally there was supposed to be legislation in 1992 when the first genetically engineered crops were brought to the FDA.
Right.
But instead of legislation, they decided to have a meeting in the White House. And the difference is if there is a public hearing or a congressional
who was
hearing.
president?
The meeting was actually in Dan Quayle's office.
Okay.
Okay. If there's a congressional hearing, as you know, records are kept.
Yeah.
And you know what is said. A meeting in the White House, that is not the case. The decision made at that meeting in 1992 was that genetically engineered food are what they refer to as substantially equivalent to non-engineered food, and therefore they could just go on the market. But it gets more complicated because most genetically engineered foods by Monsanto, Syngenta, Dow, DuPont, Bayer are all patented. So if I'm creating a food that is so different that it can be patented, how can at the same time it be substantially equivalent?
Right.
And so, but that was the decision made by the White House. The FDA endorsed it.
At the
And-
recommendation of Michael Taylor, who was with the USDA, came from Monsanto as a Monsanto vice president, went to a Monsanto employee, went to the USDA, said these are substantially equivalent, got that in place, went back to Monsanto as vice president, went back to the U.S. government as for the FDA. He's the food czar for the FDA now. So this is the person that's making our rules that's going back and forth. There are so many people that
You're not
work
implying that there's some.
revolving door of Monsanto.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of them in the government that come to Monsanto. They go back and forth, and
So it's not party relevant.
No,
no,
absolutely
No,
not.
they're all on the take. Is what
Yeah.
it's what I just heard.
yep.
Well, it certainly is not a partisan issue. If you look at
So they're it's a bipartisan fleecing of the public.
You could say that.
It's
And
good to
it
know.
should
that
not be. It should not be a partisan issue.
No,
we
it shouldn't.
all eat, so it affects
I
everybody.
took that personal too.
Really? Yeah. I don't blame you.
Now, so what was the first genetically altered food? Do you remember?
The flavor
I-
saver tomato.
well, no, I mean corn.
When they went, but that was for ethanol, or was it?
Well, the first thing that I think of as a food, even though of course we know that most corn is not any longer used for food, but the earliest, as I understand it,
Okay.
genetic product efforts for genetically engineering were corn and soy.
Okay.
And those are still the things that most people know about. And my concern, and one of the reasons to introduce the legislation, was if you don't know high fructose corn syrup is bad for you at this point, you're not paying attention.
Right.
Those people aren't going to care if their food is genetically engineered. But the concern is that now tomatoes, squash, papaya, pineapple, vegetables, fruits. There's something called the Arctic apple, which is a Canadian company is creating a genetically engineered apple. And most people just aren't aware of that.
Okay.
So most of us know if the first ingredient is high fructose corn syrup, it is. You might want to eat it anyway because it's delicious, but you're probably not going to make it your whole diet. But people trying to feed their families, fruits, vegetables, protein, there's a genetically engineered fish, salmon, called the Aqua Advantage, that is engineered with an eel gene, to make it faster, grow faster, bigger, etc. But for instance, if I keep kosher, And part of keeping kosher is I can only eat fish that have scales, fins. And
Right.
Well, an eel doesn't. And now this salmon is being engineered. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying we have the right to know if our fruits, our vegetables, our protein is being genetically engineered. I think corn, soy, cottonseed apple, that train has left the station, so to speak.
Yeah, but you should still be able to be aware of it.
I agree, but it's the new stuff coming on the market without labeling that I think is critical to people who are trying to figure out why they have allergies, why they have a reaction to something. They're trying the best they can to feed their kids, to feed their family. And stop me because I am awful about this, but people say, well, why doesn't everybody just buy organic? Well, if you've ever looked at the price of organic foods, they're very expensive.
Yep.
The average family out there working
Can't afford it.
can't afford to buy all organic food, and even if they could, all foods don't have an organic version. So that's what labeling's all about. So if for religious reasons, for health reasons, for just trying to figure out what to feed my family, I want it labeled.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I go back to the allergies. I'm not allergic to tomatoes, but if they organically change it enough, and especially if you got a little kid,
Yeah,
do you give little kids tomatoes? Yeah, you do, right?
of course.
No, I don't have
They
any
may
kids,
not
I
want
don't
them,
know.
but you
Well, my granddaughters eat, and I stay away because it's pretty disgusting. Some of the stuff that kid wears in her hair her hair is very nice and shiny, but it's kind of clumped together. And so, my point is that if you got a kid and you've said, okay, he or she is allergic to A, B, C, and D, but then all of a sudden you give them tomatoes, which they've never had a reaction to, it could kill the kid. Because you didn't know that it was just altered with, like I said, a legume. I mean, this is really dangerous stuff.
I do want to go on record that the salmon that she described has not yet been approved. It might be approved any day now. The apple that they changed just so that it won't turn brown. I mean, like, that's a really big important thing. So you can bite into an apple, put it down, and let it sit there for a while, and it won't turn brown.
That actually scares me. I was at work and I ordered a salad, and a piece of lettuce fell into my desk. I didn't notice it. And about 2 days later, I looked and said, "Oh, geez, that's gross." It was still green. That kind of bothered me. I said, "What the heck am I eating?"
Right.
If you got a piece of lettuce that sits on the ground and it was for 2 days and it's still green, that's kind of there's an issue there. I don't know.
Well, sorry. It makes me think of those, you know how Twinkies are supposed to last forever because of all the chemicals they put in them.
I know.
The apple has not yet been approved. It is
Right.
waiting for approval. Right now,
No, do you know what they altered with to get it to stay?
they didn't add anything to that particular one. What they did was they turned off a gene to keep it from browning.
Okay.
But the browning is part of the built-in pesticide of the apple. Apples are the fruit with the most pesticides put on it. So if it's going to keep the browning ability, keeps the insects from eating it, they're going to have to put more pesticides on. So that's one reason to not want it. But
Right.
in the process of turning off that gene, could they also have accidentally turned another gene off as well, or turned something else on? Flick one off, flick one on. We don't know.
Right.
And we won't know for a while.
Yeah.
We've
well,
been eating this stuff for 20 years, and there's no long-term health studies on it.
which is insane because
Yeah.
if it was a drug,
It would be tested like
they have to
crazy.
test it.
Right.
But something, the drug, you can choose whether or not you take it. Food,
Right.
you got to have food. We've been eating it for 20 years. They have tested it on some rats for 30 days, and they say, okay, we tested it for 30 days, and Monsanto or the others, we've tested it for 30 days, or 90 days. I'm sorry, 90 days. And the rat's fine, so it's fine. So
Good enough.
It's safe. And the FDA says, oh, you say it's fine, so okay, based on what you told us, it's fine. Well, think about the rats that they're using have a 2-year life expectancy. So if you're testing that rat for 90 days in human lifestyle, life expectancy, that's about 9.9 years. So you take a newborn baby and you feed it for 9.9 years and say this person is going to be fine for the rest of their life. Well, what happens when that person grows up and starts having children or grandchildren?
Right.
We don't know what's going to be the long-term thing. We need to take it a little bit slower. This may be a great technology,
Yeah.
but we don't know, and there's not enough studies being done to prove that it.
Yeah, you would have to go through a few generations of rats to actually get even a reasonable idea.
And one thing we do know now is that BT has been found in the cord blood of newborn infants.
What's BT?
It's a
BT toxin.
pesticide that the way it works is it essentially makes the insect's stomach explode if the insect eats the thing that has been treated.
Okay.
Corn
But-
and now sugar beets are being made to create their own BT toxin within every single cell of that plant.
Oh.
So
Wow.
you take your ear of corn that has BT toxin built into it, you wash it off, anything that has been applied to the outside might wash off,
Huh.
but you can't wash off stuff that's inside every single cell.
Right.
And they are finding it in urine of pregnant women, in the cord blood of infants. And the other thing, most infant formula is based on soy.
Wow.
And most soy is genetically engineered. So most infants who are, unless they're being fed organic infant formula or breastfed, are ingesting enormous amounts of genetically engineered soy. And we don't know what's going to happen.
Because I know my grandson, especially when he was not the one that was just
Not
trying to
Scotty.
take over my
The job.
esteemed position, but the teenier one, he was throwing up almost everything he ate. It could be something like that, but you don't know.
Right.
That's why we need testing, and we need transparency, and we need labeling.
Right. Yep. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was just curious, whatever ended up happening with this legislation?
There were two bills. The House bill died. It lost by 23 votes.
Okay.
So 12 votes, so to speak, in the other direction, it would have passed. The
Yeah.
Senate bill has gone to a study committee over the summer, which is another way of saying essentially it's going to die when the legislature comes back this fall.
Okay.
But 90% of New Hampshire residents in a poll that was done last October said they supported labeling.
Well, it only makes sense. I mean, if you really think about it, being able to know what's in your food is just reasonable.
Right.
That's all it
Yeah.
is.
You know. And but the other one I wanted to touch on before we run out of time is, and I don't know what the number is. I read so many different things that I can't keep track of everything, but that Monsanto itself has control of a very high percentage of the world's food supply. Is that correct?
Yes.
Like it's huge. I don't know what 50%, 70%,
I don't know
You
the
know
I
number,
don't
and
think
that
it's
sounds
quite
high.
that high.
but it's huge.
It's
But
yeah.
there are sort of a big six of companies that genetically engineer food.
and make the chemicals that they're genetically engineered
Yes,
to
I mean-
resist.
So yeah, so if you took those big six
they control
and they can
yes.
because I have heard stories of Monsanto in even in third world countries. Let's say wheat. They do wheat. No, you said they don't do wheat.
No.
Okay, so let's say corn. A farmer will grow corn, genetically altered corn, and some of it will end up in the field next to it, and then they'll sue the guy
Yes.
because that's their corn and that's their patent, and
And that happens in this country and and particularly in third world countries.
Wow.
In India, there were you can't ever explain why someone just gives up on life. And I think we're all really aware of that, particularly lately. But there was a flurry of suicides among Indian farmers who had been convinced to try genetically engineered crops, and then were unable to continue. Because one of the things, if I buy a genetically engineered seed, it's patented, I pay for it, and I'm not allowed to save it, which means now I'm a captive audience to the producer of that seed.
So next year you have to buy
I have
it
to
again.
buy it again. It's not the way with
And-
natural seeds. I save the same seed and use it year after year. And these farmers were losing their farms. And when you think about the poverty level in some third world countries, and I reach the point, for whatever reason, my crop fails, I can't afford to buy seed the next year, what happens? And again, everybody has the right to make a buck. I mean, I think this country is based on people being innovative, people working hard, people becoming well-to-do based on what they have done. But I also think transparency is critical.
Yeah.
And that's what this legislation is all about.
Well, the thing, this is one of the reasons I depart from the libertarians. The libertarians, like I said, believe in a free market. I believe in a free market if it's morally regulated.
Yeah.
Because a capitalistic, unbarred capitalistic society leads you to the exact same place as a communist society. It's just different masters.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
You have to, because capitalism is by far the best idea in the world. I mean, if I can work hard and make a widget and then sell the widget, and I take like basically nothing and create a product that people want, and I'm able to sell it,
And I'm able to hire people.
and I own that property, that's mine. That's huge. That's why the United States became the creative engineer of the world, is because of that property rights. But if you allow it to go unfettered without some sort of moral guidelines of what is or isn't okay, then you end up with a very small group of people controlling all the food in this case in the country, which is as much a threat to liberty as anything else. And that's why I don't
control of food and water are
Exactly.
the things
Yeah.
that are the most critical.
And that's why I don't understand my Republican and Libertarian friends, because if they could see that, you're talking about a few companies owning the rights to most of the food in the country, which could easily be turned around and sold to a country that wasn't, or a power that wasn't friendly to the United States, and they would own us.
But the interesting thing is 64 countries in the world require labeling, including Russia and China, for their citizens.
Right.
They're refusing some of our crops because they have been genetically
And that is one of
that's
the issues.
interesting.
Even though wheat is not genetically engineered, there was a case in Oregon State last year where apparently a test field had been planted, and birds, bees, wind doesn't know the difference, and the wheat in that field became contaminated with this test crop of genetically engineered wheat, and they went to sell it, and it was rejected in Europe.
Wow.
Because they know we genetically engineer crops, and so they test them. So it hurts American farmers in terms of sales overseas as
Right.
well.
Every single major industrial country in the world, except United States and Canada, have legislation for genetically engineered foods. We're the only two.
What about other states in the U.S.? Are there other states that have passed legislation similar to what you've tried to do
Vermont, Connecticut, and
Maine.
Maine have all passed it.
here? Okay.
Two of those states, Vermont, gutsily enough, just went on their own.
Yeah.
But Connecticut and Maine have what it's called a trigger clause, which their law will only go into effect when there are a total of 5 states within the Northeast.
Huh. Really?
So New Hampshire can be a leader in this.
Yeah.
New Hampshire could really be a hero here. And we are protected because we have a trigger clause in our bills as well, which means we're not going to go it alone. If 5 New England or Northeast states all require labeling, then grocers are going to do it. It's not going to be a problem. If you look at all those
Okay.
companies, speaking of Hershey and chocolate, they label for 64 countries in the world that require labeling. They not only label, they do it in like 8 different languages. So labeling is not a big deal.
Yeah.
It changes all the time. You've seen, like at Christmas, all of a sudden you see labels with little wreaths on it,
Sure.
or Halloween, little goblins on the milk carton. Labeling gets changed all the time. It's just part of marketing.
Yeah.
And it can be done. New Hampshire can be the vanguard rather than follow up in the end.
Right.
And the other thing is there's a 2018 cutoff, so it's not like this will drag on forever. In Connecticut and Maine, it says if these 5 states, 3 of which have already passed it, do not pass labeling legislation by 2018, then the whole thing becomes dead.
Okay.
So we've got 4 more years to really make a difference in terms of people having the right to know what's in their food.
You said that Europe, China, Russia all already require GMO labeling.
Labeling, yeah. Some countries outright ban it. Some sections of some countries outright ban it. But the countries about which I'm speaking are mostly labeling.
Yes, but what my question is, have any of researchers in any of those countries done studies on specific genetically altered foods to determine that there's an issue? In other words, if they eat regular corn, if 2,000 people eat regular corn, there's no reaction, but if they feed 2,000 people the genetically altered corn, 1 out of 20 of them has a massive reaction or a reaction or can have, you know what I mean? Is there any studies that follow up on the actual effects?
There have been
as opposed to the what some people would claim to be like an irrational fear of frankenfood.
Right. There's a Harvard
Is frankenfood, is that
School
is
of
that
Public Health
wait,
study.
is frankenfood original?
No,
I've heard it
you
before,
didn't
but they
come
may
up
have gotten
with
it from
sorry.
you.
Jeez.
There's the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Harvard School of Public Health, an international, the European, and ESSNR, I've forgotten what the initials stand for, have all done studies. And like anything else, people who say genetically engineered food is no different than other foods say, I can pull up my statistics too. And Monsanto, Syngenta, Bayer, DuPont, their studies all show there is no harmful side effects.
Of course they do.
Other studies show that there are. And I think we all know, as Disraeli said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. We can
Yeah.
all pick the numbers.
Well, cigarette companies had pretty good statistics to say that wasn't harmful you.
Right.
You know,
Right.
too.
And we see how far that
Yeah.
went.
And that was only because they loved you.
Trans fats just recently got proven to be harmful after 40 years.
40 years of saying
they're
there's no
safe,
problem.
They're safe, there's no
Right.
problem.
Right.
But again, what we're asking for is transparency.
Yeah, but I'm saying what I'm getting at is have any independent researchers done really good research on
Harvard
all of
School
it?
of Public Health has found studies about things such as Crohn's disease. There is a condition known as leaky bowel syndrome,
Right.
which is pretty much what you would picture it is.
Sounds unpleasant.
And there have been studies closely tying some genetically engineered products to those disorders. But again, the problem is, can we absolutely prove that smoking causes lung cancer? There's a huge correlation, but there are people who smoke who never get lung cancer.
Right.
And so for years and years and years, you can't say, yes, there's absolute proof that eating genetically engineered foods causes allergies or causes leaky bowel syndrome. But there is a correlation.
Right.
So that's why if people are responsible for their own lives, they have to have the information to make those decisions.
Right.
You know, we have a friend who keeps saying, I don't care what Nutella's made out of, I'm going to eat it. And that's true. You know, there are probably things that I would find that were genetically engineered that I'll keep eating anyway just because I like them. But at least I know the potential and I
You
can
make
make
an
that decision.
informed decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a couple of ways people can know if a food is genetically engineered. One of them is to eat organic. Organic cannot be genetically engineered. There are foods that have a thing called a non-GMO project verification,
Right.
and companies have to spend sometimes upwards of $10,000 per product. So if one company has 50 products, they're going to spend a fortune to prove that they have not changed the rules. We say the companies who have patented the foods and then say that they're different enough, they're the ones who should have to
Inform everybody.
inform everybody.
Wanna give
But
them the
however,
website?
you had a problem recently with your arm and chocolate. So I have brought you some organic chocolate
Whoa!
with the non-GMO project verification on
Thank
it.
you.
And this
awesome.
will fix Gary's arm?
Yes.
He had
yes.
a problem with chocolate in his arm.
Well, I had chocolate on my finger and I couldn't reach it to lick my.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I thought maybe that
But
was
this
going to.
this is almost as much chocolate as I had on my fingers, so it compensates.
Excellent. Good.
That's
But-
not a pretty picture.
We,
Yeah.
New Hampshire Right to Know, GMO, NHRIGHTTO, GMO.org. And we're also on Facebook. We have a very active Facebook page.
Yep.
We are working on trying to educate, and we are collecting signatures for a petition, and wondered if you might like to sign our petition.
Yes, ma'am.
Yahoo! Pen, paper,
Is this where I
There
got to
you go.
remember my name?
you can, yeah.
Oh, this is where I got to try to figure out how to sign stuff. Here, you carry on, man. I got no idea what I'm doing here.
Oh. So assuming the legislation, because it's probably going to die over the summer, right? I mean, that's so. What's the plan then?
There will be a new bill introduced in late fall. We will see it on the House or Senate calendar in early January.
Yeah. Will it be? I mean, I assume it'll be similar, but will there be changes?
There will
to
be
it?
changes, particularly in the House version of the bill. Last summer, there were 19 subcommittee meetings on labeling of GMOs that went on much of the summer, and the subcommittee that heard all the testimony from all the experts, in fact, voted in favor of labeling. But as part of those series of subcommittee meetings, some changes that greatly improved the bill came out. And so the new bill that was introduced will incorporate those changes. And
Okay.
there will probably be a Senate and a House bill as well.
Okay.
No, Gary discussed the HB 660, the House bill, right after it had died. And there are some, the amended version of that bill that we were hoping would go through. You had said that restaurants were going
Well,
to
I know
have to
that
label.
that was on the House floor. That was one of the arguments with restaurants because they don't necessarily.
They're
They will be exempt.
Okay.
Animals, if a pig, a cow, is being used for meat or for milk, that animal, unless the animal has been genetically engineered, that animal will be exempt even if they eat genetically engineered feed.
Yeah, because that'd be pretty far reach to try to.
There are several exemptions. Restaurants, and one of the reasons, of course, restaurants can be exempt because if labeling happens, then the restaurant, when they buy the supplies for the restaurant, or if they buy from a local farmer, will know. Alcohol is exempt because that's regulated by the federal government.
If you're
Who
drinking
knows?
alcohol, you don't care.
Well, that's probably true.
So had the bill been given a
I
chance,
think we just lost our alcoholic
Excuse me,
audience.
Bonnie.
I'll tell you that.
Great. That's probably a lot of
That's
people.
most of them.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Farmers,
Yep.
local farmers are exempt unless they are selling at retail.
Okay.
And then they don't have to create packaging. That's all they have to do is put up a sign. For instance, it says this particular product, like this corn, is genetically engineered. But as I said, at this point, we're not huge agribusiness the way they are in the Midwest. So most crops grown in New Hampshire are not genetically engineered. The exception, like one exception, as I mentioned, was the farm in Loudon.
Right.
But most apples, tomatoes, vegetables, fruits grown here, we are local sort of farm to market things. So you don't have to do anything. Unless you are growing a genetically engineered product, then you would just put up a sign if you had a farm stand, or you would notify, say, the local restaurant or store who sold your product that this has been genetically engineered. In small New England states, that really isn't an issue at this point.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So if you were just about 12 votes shy,
12 votes would have
shy,
made
and
a
that was your
difference.
first time introducing it, correct?
Well, it was introduced back in the early 90s.
Okay.
It had gone to committee, I believe, say in the early like 2004, 2000.
Yeah, I don't remember that one.
It was one of those ITL 19-1 in committee.
Right.
So the fact that we got a positive vote
In the committee.
in the committee,
Subcommittee.
in the subcommittee, and then I think it was 9-11 in the full committee.
Right.
So it was still recommended ITL by the full committee, but it's major progress.
Yeah. Well, ladies, thank you very much. It's been a fun hour. I think I gotta get George Lambert coming on next week.
Oh, is he coming on?
Yeah.
Good.
But
NHRightToKnowGMO.org.
NHRightToKnowGMO.org. You're on Facebook. There's ways to get involved in it, and I totally obviously I agree with you. There's
Yeah.
no reason people shouldn't have the ability to understand what they're eating. You know, it would never stop me from eating something, but it does peanuts.
Yeah.
It says peanuts.
Yeah,
I ain't
absolutely.
eating that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us
Thank
on.
you. Bye, everybody.